What's up, everyone? I'm Coach D. So, yesterday I made a video and I talked about the reasons I was going to support Kamala Harris. And one of the reasons I talked about was character. And I think I want to delve into that a little bit more and kind of talk about it a little bit because I think one thing that we need to discuss is the importance of character. Like, no matter what your Republican friends and family members say about Donald Trump and excusing his character, most of them still believe character matters. They're just excusing his because he is the leading candidate in their party. And some of them have other reasons why or whatever. But if you were to ask them straight up, if a kid at your kid's school were saying the things about you or your kid to their face that Donald Trump says at podiums in front of thousands of people about anyone who's ever opposed him, would you just accept that? Wouldn't you be at the school talking to the teacher about that kid? Wouldn't you be at the school speaking to the principal about that kid? Wouldn't you want to have a conversation with that kid's parent about the things that they're saying about your child? Like, in schools, we would call that bullying. In the workplace, we would call that bullying. We would call that harassment. We would call that like hostile environment harassment. But for some reason, people were willing to just kind of excuse it when it came to Donald Trump. I remember when Joe Biden, in the first few years of his presidency, seeing some Republicans or Trump supporters on Facebook, for instance, posting things like, oh, what I would do for a mean tweet right now, because their feeling was people got rid of Donald Trump because of his mean tweets. And I agree, that was a part of it. Let's put aside for a second that his policies weren't great. Let's put aside for a second that he spent more money than the previous two presidents before him. Let's put those things aside. Let's put aside, the COVID response that was horrible as well. Let's just talk about the times he stood in front of thousands of people and made fun of someone with a disability. Let's talk about for a second the times he stood in front of thousands of people and made fun of someone for their weight. Let's put aside all of the bad things policy-wise that he did, and let's talk about for a second the many times he stood at a podium in front of thousands of people and made fun of someone for the way that they look. Let's talk about all of the nicknames he's made for Republican and Democratic politicians who have opposed him. People who have just come out and said, I oppose his policies on this. I disagree with him ideologically on this or that or whatever policy. Instead of him explaining his policy to these people, he instead made up a nickname for them. Again, if a kid at your child's school were doing these things, you would be outraged. You would be talking to that kid's teacher, that kid's principal, or that kid's parents about that behavior. As an educator, my wife has been an educator for 25 years as well, and she educates in a fifth grade classroom. There's no way she would allow a student to display the same negative, just the character of Donald Trump. There would be no way she would allow a student in her class to display that same character without getting in any trouble. Character matters. People believe character matters. I have had people that I know say things like, oh, he speaks his mind. That's not a big deal. That's locker room talk. Then you ask them, if your son were engaging in that talk, would you just excuse it or would you say, that's not cool? If your husband were engaging in some of the things, saying the things that he has said in public, would you be okay with that? Would you be okay with your kid in fifth grade, sixth grade, whatever grade, talking to another kid at school the way that he talks to other politicians or talks about other politicians? Most people say no. And a lot of the polls right now are showing that the reason why independents and more Democrats are flocking to the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz campaign is because of character. No matter what the media might tell you, no matter what Fox News, Newsmax, and OAN says about him speaking his mind and how that's okay and everything, a lot of people don't want that. A lot of people don't want that. And the more we move closer and closer to November and people start to realize there are no policies being discussed at his rallies. He speaks for an hour or two, and most of the time it's criticisms, it's nicknames, it's making fun of people. When he has an opportunity to speak on policy, that's not what's happening. And that is why a lot of people, independents, Democrats, even now Republicans for Kamala Harris, are flocking to her campaign because character. Period.